Hello, and welcome back to the Podcasting Problem Solver. I'm Leah Bryant, your host, certified podcast growth coach, producer, helping business owners create shows that build authority, grow their audience, and support their bottom line. Now, today's episode is for every podcaster who's ever stared at their content calendar and thought, who in the world should I invite on my show next? Or maybe you've had a few guests, but something kind of felt off. Like the interview felt flat, the conversation wandered into random tangents, or the guest ghosted you when it came time to share the episode. Because yes, it happens. And no, it doesn't mean your show isn't worth sharing. Here's the truth. Not every guest is a good guest. And inviting people just to fill your lineup is like throwing darts blindfolded and hoping one hits the bullseye. You might get lucky, but more often, you'll just end up with an episode that doesn't move your show or your business forward. So today, we're going to fix that. We're going to dig into how to find the right guest. Not just whoever is easiest to book, but people who align with your audience, your expertise, and the kind of authority you want to build. Spoiler, the biggest name isn't always the best fit. And we're going to go through how to pitch them without sounding awkward or desperate. Because nothing kills credibility faster than a copy and paste email that screams, please validate me. You need a pitch that positions your podcast as valuable to them too. Next, we want to prepare for interviews that actually will support your brand and strategy. So you walk away with an episode that serves your listeners, highlights your expertise, and leaves your guest looking good. And this isn't just about one episode. This is about building a long-term rhythm and flow. It's part of the attraction phase in my seamless podcast framework because the right guest can open the door to their audience and bring new ears to your show. And it does tie directly into momentum because when you have a reliable system for finding and booking guests, you also stay consistent without scrambling. Win-win, right? So I want you to think of your guest strategy like curating a dinner party. You don't just invite random people who happen to be free, right? You think about who will bring interesting conversation, who will vibe with the group, and who you'd actually want to invite back. When you curate, well, everybody has a better experience. And that includes your listeners too. So if guest episodes have ever felt stressful, scattered, or like a wasted effort, well, this episode is going to be for you. So, why do guests matter? A great guest brings way more than just a fresh voice to your show. They can completely shift the energy of your podcast in ways that keeps listeners engaged and coming back. Here's what the right guest brings to the table. A fresh perspective. Guests can share their stories and their insights or experiences that you necessarily don't have. That variety makes your show feel richer and more dynamic. Number 2 is an audience crossover. Every guest comes with their own circle of influence, and when they share the episode, you're suddenly introduced to new ears that may never have found you otherwise. Next is credibility by association. So even if they're not a household name, the simple fact that you're having a smart, thoughtful conversation with them elevates your authority. It's the tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. Having a guest also gives you a break in solo recording. Because let's be real here. Sometimes it's just nice to bounce ideas off someone else, right? Guests can lighten the load for you and help keep your content pipeline moving without burning yourself out. But here's the secret most podcasters miss. You don't need a celebrity guest list to create powerful episodes. In fact, chasing big names just for the brag factor will often backfire. Celebrities are busy. They're hard to prep for. And they may never even share your episode. So, what do you need? Are people who are aligned with your topic, right? So that the conversation feels relevant and valuable. Your values. So you're proud to have their voice on your platform. And your audience's needs. so that your listeners will walk away with real takeaways and not just another generic interview. They want that conversation, right? The truth is, the most impactful guest episodes usually come from people who are just a few steps ahead of your audience. They're relatable, they're accessible, and they bring insights your listeners can use. Think about it this way. Your listeners don't need a Hollywood story, but they do need a guide, a peer, or an expert who speaks directly to their stage of the journey. Now, one of the biggest myths in podcasting is that you have to, quote unquote, know the right people to book strong guests. Well, the truth is, actually, you probably already have access to amazing potential guests. You just haven't thought to look in the right places yet. And here are some of my favorite starting points. Number one is your existing network. That's right. Start close to home. Think about past clients, business peers, or even mastermind friends. These people already know, like, and trust you, which means the conversation will feel more natural and the likelihood of them sharing your episode is much higher. And a bonus is that they're often thrilled to have a platform to showcase their own expertise. Number two, your Instagram or LinkedIn DMs. So pay attention to the people consistently commenting, sharing, or sliding into your inbox. If someone's already engaging with your content, there's a good chance they'd love to collaborate, and their audience will be curious about you too. Number three, communities and groups. Do not sleep on Slack groups, Facebook communities, or even mentorship networks you're already a part of. These spaces are filled with professionals who are actively looking to grow their reach and share their own message. With a thoughtful ask, you can uncover hidden gems who are knowledgeable, approachable, and motivated. Next, guest booking platforms. Tools like Podmatch, Matchmaker.fm can both be a great way to find aligned guests, especially if you're newer to podcasting. Think of them as dating apps for podcasters. You can filter by niche, expertise, or even audience size to find someone who is a good fit for your show. Hands down, my most favorite strategy is ask your audience. This is where you poll your listeners, post a story on Instagram, or send an email asking, who would you love to hear on the podcast? Not only will this give you fresh ideas, but it also makes your audience feel invested in the show. And trust me, they'll be the first ones to hit play when their recommendation gets featured. Here's the biggest takeaway for you. You don't have to chase people who feel out of reach. The best guests are often already within arm's length. You just need to ask, invite, and create a space for conversation. A quick example. One of my clients once landed her most downloaded episode by inviting someone she'd met in a small mastermind group. This wasn't a big name guest, but she had a perspective that perfectly aligned with the podcast audience. Because the guest felt invested, she promoted the episode everywhere. And guess what? It ended up outperforming interviews with more well-known people. And that, my friends, is the power of choosing guests who are the right fit rather than the most famous. So, how do we pitch guests without feeling gross, right? Because sending cold pitches can feel, well, awkward. Nobody wants to come across as spammy or desperate or like you're just collecting names for clout. But here's the thing. A good pitch, it's not about you. It's about creating a clear, easy to say yes opportunity for your guest. The key is to keep it short, clear, and listener focused. And that's the key piece, okay? Here's a quick formula that you can swipe for every pitch. Number one, who are you? Plus a quick podcast context. So give them a headline version. Who you are, what your podcast is about, one sentence, not a full bio. Number two, why you're reaching out and why them. Be specific. What makes this person a fit for your audience? Why them and not just any guest? Number three, well, what's in it for them? Highlight the benefit. This could be exposure to your audience, content they can repurpose, or a chance to talk about their latest project in a meaningful way. And then number four, what's next? Remove that friction. Share your booking link or an easy next step so they don't have to chase you down. So an example could be, hey, insert name. I'm Leah, host of Podcasting Problem Solver, a show that helps entrepreneurs launch and grow binge-worthy podcasts. I'd love to have you on the show to talk about insert specific topic. I know my listeners would benefit from your perspective on XYZ. If you're interested, I'll send a booking link. Super simple. No prep heavy process. Let me know if you're game. See how easy that was? A pro tip for you is make it so ridiculously easy that they say yes. And that means no vague pitches. Like, come talk about whatever you want. And please, no 7-paragraph life stories. We don't want that. And definitely no copying and pasting the same pitch to 50 people. Because you know what? We can see and smell and hear and all the things those from a mile away. A fun bonus insight is that when you do have someone on your show, it's a really great icebreaker. It gives them a chance to know you, your style, and your audience. And it often opens up a door for them to invite you on their show in return. So that one pitch could turn into a true collaboration and not just a one-off interview. So that way you both benefit. A quick story for you. One of my clients was terrified to reach out to someone she admired in their industry. She almost talked herself out of it. But she kept her pitch super simple. We were clear and very audience focused. And not only did the guest say yes, but they ended up sharing the episode across their platforms, driving a huge spike in downloads. The lesson is that you don't need to oversell yourself. Just show the guest why the conversation matters and makes a process friction-free. Here's the thing. Inviting guests onto your podcast doesn't mean handing over the steering wheel. You're still the host, the guide, and the strategist. A great guest episode feels conversational and collaborative, but it should always serve your bigger goals. Now, I'm going to share some ways to keep your guest interview aligned, but I do also want to add a little tip here for you. When you have a guest on, if they're a big name or not a big name, always remember, as I previously have said, that this is your show. You are the host. So make sure that you are in control of the conversation. Never, ever, ever open up the episode with, "Hi, XYZ, tell me about yourself." Because then you're opening them up to have a 20-minute monologue about themselves. And we don't want that. We want it to be succinct and versed for your audience. So let's jump into how we can kind of keep guest interviews more aligned with your strategy, okay? Number one, we are going to prep a topic or a theme in advance. Don't wing it. Decide the angle of the conversation before you ever hit record. Guests will also appreciate the clarity, and your audience will thank you for keeping the episode focused. And number two, we want to send a few guiding questions, but then also leave room for flow, right? Remember, I'm a big proponent of thinking as the episode as a conversation and not an interview. By doing this, you not only keep the conversation on track, but you also allow for organic moments that make the interview or conversation feel real and engaging. Next, you want to keep your audience's needs at the center. Remember, you're not just chatting for fun. I mean, even though sometimes it really is, every question that you ask should connect back to what your listeners care about most. Like ask yourself, what do I want my audience to take away from this conversation? And kind of reverse engineer from there. And then last, we want to decide if this topic ties into your offer, your expertise, or your content themes. This is where the strategy piece comes in. If the guest's expertise complements your paid offer, don't shy away from drawing that connection. That way, the episode works double duty, right? It's delivering value and gently positioning your services. When you lead the conversation like the expert you are, your guests will elevate your brand, not dilute it. Remember that. You set the tone, you guide the flow, and you decide what your audience walks away with. Another example for you is that one of my clients once had an amazing guest lined up, but during the recording, the conversation just kept drifting toward topics that had nothing to do with her audience's goals. Because she'd prep her core questions, she was able to gently redirect the guest and pull the focus back to what mattered. And the result, after some editing, a polished, on-brand episode that our listeners loved. And the guest still came away looking really great. And that's the power of leading with strategy, instead of letting the conversation run wild. And you know what? Another tip is that the podcast is yours, and you can reserve the right to not air the episode. So if the conversation is going and it does keep drifting and you're not able to bring it back to focus so that it does align with your audience's goals, you do not have to publish that episode. Remember that, okay? Now, what about some red flags? Because we want to make sure that we are avoiding those. So, fun fact, not every guest is the right guest. In fact, sometimes the best move you can make for your podcast is to politely decline. Protecting your platform is part of protecting your brand. Here are some red flags to watch out for. Number one, they only want to pitch their book or their offer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with mentioning a project, but if their only motivation is self-promotion, your listeners are going to feel it and they're going to tune in and then tune out, right? Number two, they don't align with your brand voice or your audience. If their messaging, values, or style clash with yours, it can create confusion for your audience. Remember, your podcast is a reflection of your brand. Don't bring in voices that undermine that. Number three, they ghost you on promo or follow-up. Yeah, I mean, it happens. Collaboration does go both ways. If a guest is unwilling to share the episode or completely disengages after recording, that's a sign they weren't invested in the partnership. And last, they ask for final editing control. I mean, unless you're cool with that, which I highly recommend not doing, but some guests want to approve the final cut before it airs. And unless this is your normal workflow, which if it is, then we definitely need to talk because it shouldn't be. It can compromise your creative control. You're the host. You decide what makes it into the episode. And here's the truth. Saying no thanks is part of protecting your show's integrity. A guest who isn't aligned can do more harm than good, whether that's draining your energy, turning off listeners, or even diluting your message. It happens. Another example that I can share is I once heard from a podcaster who interviewed a guest that seemed perfect on paper, but when the recording started, every answer circled back to promoting their latest book. And the host honestly ended up scrapping the episode because it felt more like an infomercial than a conversation. And that, my friends, that's not failure. That's discernment. Sometimes protecting your show means leaving an episode on the cutting room floor. All right, so let me share a real story here with you. One that brings in a little bit of strategy and a little bit of a guest pivot. So one of my clients had a podcast that looked amazing from the outside. She landed big names. Her lineup read like the who's who of her industry, but behind the scenes, she was frustrated, right? The downloads were there, but the results weren't. Her audience wasn't converting. When we dug in, the problem became clear. The content was solid, but the guests weren't actually relevant to her ideal clients. The conversations, sure, they were interesting, but they weren't moving her listeners closer to working with her. So we made some strategic pivots. Instead of chasing star power, she shifted her focus more to align with inviting guests who matched her audience's stage, people just a step or two ahead of her listeners so the advice felt relatable and actionable. She did do more solo episodes to position herself as the expert instead of the interviewer. She tied every guest episode topic to her core offer, so that way we can make sure that each conversation reinforced her authority and pointed back to the transformation that she provides. And last, repurposing, right? We created clips that supported her brand. So every episode worked double duty across her social platforms and nurtured her audience between releases. The result? More engagement, more signups, and a podcast that finally worked with her business instead of against it. Her episodes started generating DMs, discovery calls, and conversions, not just downloads. And that is the power of a guest strategy that supports your brand instead of distracting from it. So if you've been stuck on guest outreach or your last interview felt like it missed the mark, well, this is your sign to recalibrate. Get intentional, be strategic, and remember, your podcast is your platform. Lead it like the pro you are. And if you want a guest pitch email template, a ready-to-use question list, or even an interview checklist, I send tips, strategies, and tools like this to my newsletter subscribers every week. Join the Podcasting Problem Solver newsletter at the link below and get resources you need to book better guests, create stronger episodes, and grow your audience with confidence. And hey, if this episode sparked ideas for you, make sure you're following the show. You could even send me your podcasting questions. There's a link in the description below where you could text me. You might just hear your answers in a future episode. And until next time, podcasters, stay curious, Stay strategic. And above all else, keep it seamless. And we'll see you next week.